Good evening. Welcome. If people in the hallway want to come in, I know everyone's lining up to get their weather radios. If you didn't pick one up, there are boxes and boxes of them out there, so there's no rush. We'll be here they'll be out there throughout the whole program. Anyway, I am so delighted that all of you are here and made some time out of your evening on a Thursday evening to come out on a very important topic. I'm really delighted. We have had so many wildfire town halls in years past, and we'll have 10 people in the audience. And tonight, I'm glad to see how many people are here, and we have almost 60, if not more than that, online watching, because this is a hybrid meeting. So I'd like to introduce myself. If you don't know who I am, my name is Ara Miranyan. I'm the city manager for Rancho Palos Verdes, and so I'm gonna sort of MC this evening's agenda. We have a lot to cover in 2 hours. We're going to try to get you out in 2 hours. I know everyone has things to do and want to get their rest, but I want to just give a little background as to why the city decided to do this town hall at this point. And as we all know, we all watched the devastation and the tragic events that took place on January 7th. That's when it started. And I remember, I'm going to share a story. A couple council members, the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and Council Member Steve Perestam, who are here this evening, we were all up in Sacramento meeting. We were about to go into a meeting with Cal OES and FEMA on the landslide matter, and my phone went off, and it alerted me that there was a fire, a brush fire that had started. And when I looked at the app that I have, the camera was directed across the Pacific Ocean towards the west side, and I said, oh, something's happening over in the Malibu Palisades area. And within the 2-hour meeting that we had with Cal OES and FEMA, by the time that meeting ended, they looked at us and they said, something major is happening in LA. And we got back to our hotel. We were up there for a conference, and many people that were there from different cities were catching flights going home because they said there's a big incident. The airports are going to be shutting down. And we flew back to LA that Wednesday, and I'll never forget being in the plane and flying into it and getting the alerts as you entered into those geozones. But the next day, to see what was happening and I started receiving several inquiries from the public about what is the city doing, how are we preparing, how are we responding, how's our water situation. So many questions were coming to us. What are you doing for fuel modification? How are you dealing with the open space, the brush? And we said as a city, that we need to bring everybody together and discuss this in a town hall setting to share information so all of us are better prepared. Preparedness is what helps get you through a crisis, and that's what tonight is all about. We have a lot of speakers from different agencies, from the fire department, from the sheriff's department, from our water, all the wholesalers, the retailers of our water agencies that represent us. We have the public works department here. We also have an individual from the Department of Insurance here. But we have others here that I want to take a moment to acknowledge. I know we have Assembly Member Murasucci, who's going to speak in a minute. We've got our Mayor Bradley here. I've got Mayor Pro Tem Paul Seo in the back, as well as Council Member Steve Perestam. We also have the Emergency Preparedness Committee. I have to tell you, your city, Rancho Palos Verdes, has an amazing team of volunteers that serve on our Emergency Preparedness Committee. They put so many hours into plans and strategies on how we as a city respond to a natural disaster. I know we're talking about wildfires, but the Palos Verdes Peninsula, Rancho Palos Verdes, we are prone to other types of disasters, landslide, earthquakes, floods, mudslides. These are all things that we always need to be prepared for. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Assembly Member Murasucci. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much to Mr. Moranian and Mayor Bradley and the entire City Council that is here today. My name is Al Marisucci. I have the privilege of representing Palos Verdes in the South Bay in the California Legislature. But I'm also here as a neighbor of Palos Verdes. I've lived in Palos Verdes for about 10 years now. And so, you know, when the recent LA wildfires broke out, and especially when I was reading more about what was happening in the Palisades, you know, I was asking, I think, a lot of the same questions that you're going to be asking tonight, that you're going to be looking for the answers for. You know, I've been in the legislature for 10 years now, and in 2018, I went to Paradise, California, after their devastating wildfire. And the first thing I noticed was the limited ingress and egress to and from Paradise. And so, you know, one of the main questions I have on my mind is, you know, how are we here on the peninsula? Do we have enough roads to get in and out, especially in the case of an emergency? Speaking of the recent wildfires in the Palisades, I was reading those LA Times hour-by-hour accounts of, you know, how much time they had. I mean, basically between like 10:30, around 10:30 when the fires first broke out, to when people started evacuating and cars started backing up, you know, on the limited ingress and egress, you know, how are we going to be prepared here in the peninsula? And so, you know, those are some of the many questions. I know water, you know, everyone's going to be asking about the Palos Verdes Reservoir. You know, do we have that emergency water supply to be able to address those needs? So like many of you, I think I have some of the same questions. And so I look forward to, want to thank the city for putting on this town hall and bringing together the first responders, the water department, to be able to provide us answers so that we could be better prepared. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Bradley.
Thank you, Ara. I just want to welcome everybody on the behalf of the City of Rancho Palos Verdes and the City Council. As Ara was saying, this is critically important to not only the City of Rancho Palos Verdes, but all cities on the peninsula. We're all in this together. I like to say, you know, it's one peninsula, but 4 cities. But this is really a group of people together that's really dedicated to how we would respond to any type of a major emergency and wildfire on the peninsula. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you to all our partners from the county, the city, the water, and all the infrastructure. So thank you, and hopefully we'll have a great discussion tonight. And thank you, Chief Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as the mayor indicated, we are 4 cities on one peninsula, and I could tell you that all 4 cities look at natural disasters and emergency preparedness holistically as one. Natural disasters do not know jurisdictional boundaries, and so we as a peninsula and the 4 cities work collectively. We meet on a regular basis. In fact, we are working together to develop a hazard mitigation plan that covers the entire peninsula. So the first topic I'd like to get right into the program is on wildfire preparedness, and I'm going to invite our chief from LA County Fire Department, Brian Kane.
Good evening, everyone. Brian Kane, LA County Fire Department. I am your local area fire chief. I will be giving you a presentation tonight on some of the preparedness things that we've done for the peninsula as it relates to wildfire. I will be giving you a little bit of education on some of our terms, some of our procedures. I'll be touching on the water sources. I'll be touching on also resources that you can find on the internet in order to help better prepare yourself. And we'll even be talking about some home hardening and some of the things that we learned from the incidents to the north of us. So firstly, like I said before, our modes of operation. So when you see the initial incident on the news, you see our fire engines and they're doing their things, but sometimes it doesn't always look like we're doing fire suppression or we're not utilizing our hoses or our water sources to put out fires. And the reason for that is because we have 4 different modes of operation. The first one being, of course, our life safety mode. So anytime in the initial phases of any kind of wildfire, we are in life mode, which means we are making sure that all of the communities, areas, streets, residents, and so forth are free of individuals. Everybody that has been asked to evacuate, that wants to evacuate, has therefore evacuated. Once we can be assured that that life mode has been satisfied, we'll move into a property conservation mode. So not always does that mean that we're out in front of the fire. Sometimes in a fast-moving wildfire like we saw in the Palisades incident, we do a tactic called fire front following, where the initial fire front has blown through. We come back in behind the fire, and we then start to extinguish fires as we see them. Sometimes you'll see on the news that you'll see many structures burning, and you're probably wondering why we are not actively fighting those fires. Well, there's a couple reasons for that. We have a little system that we use to triage how we utilize our resources and our water, and one of them is any structure that's 25% more involved is a house, unfortunately, that we have to move on from because it's a waste of water and it's a waste of resources. The one time that we will attack a fire, even though that fire or that structure maybe end up being a total loss, is to protect the structures that are around that house. So we may, dedicate manpower personnel to a house to protect the ones that are neighboring it to prevent the spread to those houses. After we've come through and done property conservation, we'll start now perimeter control. And I'll tell you some terms about control, containment, knockdown, and so forth. But perimeter control is where we start now trying to either anchor, flank, and pinch the fire to keep the perimeter from getting any larger. Finally, once we have perimeter control, we now go back into that said perimeter and we do extinguishment on everything that we can find within that perimeter or in the footprint of the fire. And then finally, we have containment. So the news, even in the very, very, very beginnings of a wildfire, will always report on containment. And you'll typically hear a fire is 0% contained. Well, containment means we have either a cut line, be a dozer, hand line, or what have you, or a hose line completely around the perimeter of a fire. So you can imagine a fire that is thousands and thousands of acres in size. True containment can take weeks to get. Red flag criteria and red flag weather. So this is another thing that's often reported on the news, but what does that exactly mean? So we go from a red flag watch to a warning to a critical weather fire criteria. And this year we reached another category that is not new, but it's only been reached, as far as I know, 4 or 5 times in my career, which is extreme. So critical fire weather criteria is a 10-hour fuel moisture of less than 10%, a wind of 15 miles an hour, and a relative humidity of 25%. So on the fire that we had in the Palisades, we had 10-hour fuel moistures that were way lower than 10%, and anytime you have long, dry conditions, all of your vegetations throughout the city, wherever they are, whether they be live or dead, are constantly absorbing and giving off moistures. We weigh those fuels daily to see what their moisture content is. Anything below 10% is considered critical. Wind of 15 miles an hour. That's not a very strong wind. In the Palisades fire, we had winds of over 80 miles an hour. And then, of course, relative humidity. And for the fires that we had to the north of us, we had single-digit humidities in those areas. So obviously within this red flag criteria, there's different levels within that. So the way I like to explain the weather that we experienced in the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire was the 1% of the 1%. So basically had hurricane force winds combined with fire, and we all know what the result following that was. So we take all those numbers that we learned from the red flag conditions as it relates to the humidity, the wind, and the fuel moisture, and we calculate what we call a probability of ignition. And the longer, the drier the weather is, obviously the probability of ignition keeps rising and rising and rising until we get a change in that weather. So as you can see here, this is a picture from the Palisades incident. So you can see the ember cast that is being thrown from that palm tree in front of the McDonald's. Well, a probability of ignition of over 90%, and in some cases 100%, means 100% of those embers that you see in this picture will result in additional fire spread or growth. Ember cast, we'll be talking a lot about ember cast because ember cast is what's actually responsible for the fire spread. Ember cast can travel several miles ahead of the fire. So in some cases, we've seen ember cast with the winds that we saw at 55 to 80 miles an hour, 5 to 6 miles ahead of the advancing fire front. So these embers are thrown out 5 miles ahead, resulting in further fire spread. That's why when you see in the news that you see these acreage just exploding, it's exponential with these embers just being casted that far ahead. One thing to take note on this picture here is what's burning and what's not burning. So you can see there's a lot of trees and vegetation in this picture, but the majority of what's burning is the palm trees. So some of the larger trees, which we have in here is, some old oak trees and so forth, are very resilient to fire and not contributing to the ember cast. So other questions that I've been getting when we have fires that we had to the north is, when we're throwing all of our resources to combat these fires, is how do we maintain staffing and coverage on the peninsula? So I can tell you that the peninsula is a very severe fire severity zone. So we try to maintain staffing here, and we do maintain staffing here at 100%. So when we have the red flag conditions in the weather that we experienced, we actually augment our staffing levels. So most of the resources, the fire engines and so forth on the peninsula are 3-person. When we have a red flag condition, we add a 4th person to that apparatus. We have patrols that are not staffed on the peninsula, but during fire weather, we will staff those patrols. We have a water tender on the peninsula that we'll go through, we'll see later, that we also staff with 2 personnel. We will bring additional engines on the peninsula to maintain the coverage, because if we have red flag conditions to the north of us, we also have red flag conditions here on the peninsula. So maintaining staffing on the peninsula is a #1 priority for us. So we're going to talk about home hardening, and this is a very good example of home hardening and somebody that did their homework and prepared their house very, very well. So it's the sole survivor in this instance. Roof is probably one of the #1 areas that you can do to maintain or improve the integrity of your house. So ember-resistant materials is paramount, and gutters and cleaning those gutters out regularly is also very, very, very important. So in this picture here, you can see the gentleman cleaning his house, but you can also look down and see that not only is he cleaning his gutters, but he also has the covers over the gutters to keep any of the deadfall from falling down into those gutters for collection. So I know in the Palos Verdes Peninsula, there's a lot of red tile roofs. Red tile roofs are very fire resistant, but keep in mind that as those tiles overlap, there can sometimes be an air gap from one tile to the next. So if you want to really, really harden that tile roof, you need to seal those gaps from tile to tile. Windows. So dual pane windows with the outer layer being of tempered glass is critical into keeping that fire from entering your house. So a single pane window will radiate heat. So if you have fire on the outside and anything that's flammable on the inside, whether it be a window covering, drapery, furniture, what have you, the heat will go right through that glass and ignite that material that's on the other side of the glass. So a dual pane window with tempered glass on the outside will keep that radiant heat from entering your house. Another critical area of the window is to make sure it's sealed all the way around with some kind of a caulking or sealant to keep those embers from entering your house through any kind of crack or opening. Walls. Consider using brick, cement, masonry, and stucco. Some of the older construction on the peninsula was old wood shake sidings and wood sidings and so forth, which does have an architectural appeal. However, it is very flammable. So anytime you can move away from any of those smaller, thinner dimensional lumber sidings, they're better off that you will be as it relates to your walls and exterior ignition sources. Decks and patios. So decks and patios, we all are familiar with those, and usually they have a large void space underneath, which usually is a collection area for some residences. So it's very important to keep the area under your deck clear, because directly above that flammable material that your deck is overhanging is also a receptive area for any kind of embers. And decks will, with no covering on them as it relates to stucco or what have you, are a prime ignition source for any fire that could begin under that deck. It's a good idea to enclose the underside of the deck to further fire harden that deck as well. So here we are back at venting systems and as it relates to vents. So in the old days, that we just put like an 1/8 inch mesh over your attic vents, your crawl space vents, whatever the venting systems your particular home has, and we kind of called it good. Well, we're finding, and we have found that those venting systems are just not adequate. So what you kind of need is a dual purpose vent that has not only the 1/8 inch opening mesh, but also has a louver or a chamber type of a system, such as this picture here, or this picture here, to capture those embers when they are blown into your venting system. So these vents here will trap the ember, it'll trap it within the vent itself and keep that ember from getting into your attic space to ignite anything that could be potentially flammable within that eave, the attic, your crawl space under your house, and so forth. All of these home hardening tips, as well as a lot of other videos as it relates to home hardening, are on this website here, fire.lacounty.gov. It has a tremendous amount of resources to improve the survivability of your home, all the tips and tricks in order to keep those embers out and keep them from igniting anything within your house or around it. And of course, the Ready, Set, Go. So we have Ready, Set, Go pamphlets that are outside today. Ready, Set, Go is our brush clearance. So for 2025, as it relates to brush clearance and the upcoming season for brush clearance, everything from this year to last year has remained the same as it relates to the respective zone 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you will find any of that information here in that Ready, Set, Go program, and we will be starting our inspections in late May, obviously to conclude in June. So you will be seeing us around the peninsula conducting those inspections. Water. So there's a lot of things that the LA County Fire Department has done to help or mitigate any kind of water issue if that should happen. So one of the things that we have done is big trucks like this, these water tenders, that's 2,500 gallons of water. There is one that is here on the peninsula already. And if needed, we can call for additional water tenders, as the county has, I think, 15 or 20 of these apparatus. And we call them in strike team increments. So if we have an incident on the peninsula where I need additional water tenders, I can make a phone call and have 5 of these arrive within minutes. This is our Canadian contracted super scooper. During fire season, we utilize 2 of these aircraft. They usually arrive in August, and we keep them through fire season. Each one of these aircraft respectively can drop 1,600 gallons of water. What's great to note about this particular aircraft is we have the Pacific Ocean. So this aircraft can pick up directly from the Pacific Ocean with a very, very quick turnaround. Anytime we can get what we call a load and return for our aircraft within 3 to 5 minutes, it's extremely beneficial to our firefight. So this is another one of our aircraft. This is one of our Blackhawks. Our Blackhawks can hold 1,250 gallons of water. And this is one of the other things that the peninsula has done and Rancho Palos Verdes has done to help with the water situation and our capability, aircraft capability on the peninsula. And that is this helipod. This helipod is located right there at 3940 Hawthorne Boulevard, right next to City Hall. And this is a self-filling pod with fresh water that's connected to a water source. As the helicopter draws water out of that tank, it automatically refuels, and which allows us to utilize it in that 3 to 5 minute time frame, so they can just keep loading and return, loading and return, loading and return. Even our first alarm, which is an initial response to a wildfire, 3 of these helicopters are coming to fight that fire. Not just 1, but 3. Along with this, if the super scoopers are on contract in August, we'll also get 2 of those, and we'll also get 3 additional fixed wing air tankers from CAL FIRE. So you have 3 helicopters, 2 super scoopers, and 3 fixed wings just on a first alarm fire. So how else can we get water? So a lot of us on the peninsula have swimming pools. So all of our fire engines have the capability to pull water out of swimming pools to reload the fire engine. Every fire engine can hold 500 gallons. So if we know where a pool is, or we see an address identifying that residence has a pool and that fire engine needs water, we can utilize our equipment, we can take the water out of the pool and add it to our fire apparatus. And of course, the fire hydrants. So Cal Water does a great job of maintaining the fire hydrants, and every year in the month of March, the fire department also exercises every single fire hydrant on the peninsula, and we check it for maintenance, we check it for functionality, and we check to make sure that it has the proper clearance around it so we're able to access it appropriately should we need to utilize that hydrant. So there's been a little bit of discussion already about evacuations. Evacuations are going to be a very, very important aspect of any fast-moving wildfire. So one of the biggest tools and the best tools that we have with us now is the Genesis program, or formerly known as Know Your Zone or Zone Haven. So for those of us that live on the peninsula, each one of us respectively live in one of these zones. Your iPhone, when you're logged into the app, will show a blue dot indicating exactly what zone you are in, wherever you are on the peninsula. In case of evacuation, the fire department with law enforcement is going to partner, and we're going to call out evacuations per zone. That's going to be the first way and the most effective way that we execute these evacuations. These zones on here, with Cal OEM, we can also put other information. So as you can see on this map here, there's a couple shaded areas. Those shaded areas indicate that there's something happening in those respective zones. The respective zones on this slide happen to be the Portuguese Bend slide area. So if you were logged into your program, you could click on those areas and it will give you information about some of the hazards in that area. So these are some of the tools that we have to provide information to you as it relates to whatever's happening in your respective zone and instructions on what we would like you to do. This was already mentioned, and this is a picture from the Palisades incident. So there was some challenges with evacuation there. So the moral of the story is a evacuation that is called early and is called in a systematic fashion will hopefully prevent issues like this. So we all know that there's different levels of evacuation. There's alert, a warning, and it's now time to evacuate. There's one more in there that we don't often talk about, and that is sheltering in place. So we can put all of these terms into that Zone Haven or Genesis application so where you are, you know what we're asking you to do. Everyone on the peninsula trying to evacuate at the same time, the road systems aren't going to be able to handle it. So it's going to be imperative that we're all communicating effectively and that messaging is coming to you early and that messaging is being heard, received, and abided by so we can kind of inhibit or not have this happen to us. And here we are again, just a coordinated effort between all parties involved is going to be imperative for an effective evacuation to be successful. One of the other questions that I get quite often is, what is our evacuation route? Can you tell me how I'm going to evacuate? And that's a very, very difficult question for anyone in public safety to answer because I don't know where the incident is going to start. I don't know what the wind direction is going to be on that given day. I don't know what road systems are going to be impacted or not impacted. So the evacuation route is going to have to be established by public safety during the incident. It's going to be what we call incident driven. So I can't give you a hard and fast rule on this is the way you are going to evacuate from your particular community. Which is why it's imperative that you're connected to one of the social media outlets such as Alert South Bay, the Genesis system, your weather radio, news outlet, whatever you have, so you can get those further instructions on what evacuation route is going to be appropriate for you. My time's coming to an end, I gotta hurry up. So another question that I've gotten is, will the trail systems within the peninsula be utilized for evacuations? And the answer to that is, of course, no. They're not monitored, they're not well traveled by public safety, so please do not venture out on the trail systems to evacuate. And then, of course, we have the Pano AI cameras on the peninsula, thanks to some strong efforts by the City Council that we have here tonight. So there's 3 of these towers, each of them having 2 cameras each on them. They're constantly rotating 360 degrees with using an AI platform to find and look for smoke or a potential wildfire start. If the camera sees something, it sends an alert to public safety individuals. That alert is then looked at and monitored to see if it necessitates a response by either fire department or any type of public safety. And I made it, barely.
Personally, and I think on behalf of all of us, I think we need to give you a really big, loud round of applause for everything that the fire department has been doing, putting your lives at risk. So thank you. You know, Chief Kane ended with the Pano AI, and if you recall when I made my opening remarks, I said I got an alert on my phone. Well, that was through the Pano AI using artificial intelligence, that camera system. We have 4 cameras. Right now, 3 are functioning. We're close to having the 4th one installed, and we were able to install these 4 cameras that covers the majority of the Palos Verdes Peninsula because of a generous allocation of funding from Assemblymember Mirasucci, $1.5 million that enabled us to lease those cameras for, I believe it's about 8 years or so. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it because these wildfire cameras, I can tell you they work. I get the alerts. The first responders get the alerts. And sure enough, I got an alert and I looked at my app and the camera was oriented towards the west side, and that's how we knew something was happening. I just want to comment on a couple things and then we'll move on to our water readiness. But the chief was talking about the helipod. That helipod is at the Civic Center, and that was also made available to Rancho Palos Verdes through a grant from Cal Water that went to LA County to install that pod. And that, I know when the fires broke out in the Palisades and we were under the high red flag warning, that pod was full. The hose was connected, it was full, and we were ready to go in the event that we needed to. So just know that that's great. We are looking at installing one in Palos Verdes Estates. I know the city's looking at installing one, and we're also exploring installing another one on the east side of the city, perhaps near Ladera Linda. So I just want to comment on that. And the other thing is, one thing that we all have to remember if we're under a red flag warning, some of these aircrafts can't fly. And so that's when you have to rely on ground power to attack these fires. So thank you. I'm going to now introduce. We've got 3 different agencies that represent how water is delivered and brought to you and how you use that. And it's very interesting when you look at how water comes to the region from the Metropolitan Water District. Then one of the other wholesalers is the West Basin Water District, and then the retailer that you purchase your water from is from Cal Water. So we're going to start this part of the program with Rupen from the Metropolitan Water District.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rupam. I work for the Metropolitan Water District. We are a public agency. We're a regional water provider, and we serve 19 million people in 6 counties in Southern California, and I have a slide that shows all this. So where does this water come from? It's imported from hundreds of miles away. It's imported from the Colorado River, as you can see on this map here, and also from the northern Sierras. And it comes into Southern California via aqueducts, which are shown by the blue lines here on this map. We do not provide water directly to consumers. We provide water to our 26 member agencies. And so here, this is what we were just referring to. Here you can see these 3 agencies that are working hard for you. We all collaborate well together to make sure that you have reliable water supplies. So we provide water to West Basin Municipal Water District, our member agency that serves your area and most of the South Bay. And then they provide water to Cal Water, who then has the local distribution system and delivers that water to your homes, businesses, your faucets. And Speaking of water reliability, one of the things we do to make sure that we have reliable water supplies is take advantage of wet years and store that water. And we've had a couple of very wet winters, and so we have record high storage levels right now. The picture that you see here is Diamond Valley Lake. It's a reservoir. Metropolitan owns it. It's located in Hemet, and it's Southern California's largest reservoir. It's currently 97% full. So we are prepared in terms of water supplies for whatever we may face here in 2025. The other thing we do in terms of water reliability is operate a vast water distribution system. We have 830 miles of pipeline throughout Southern California, large diameter pipelines. So these are pipelines, most of which you and I could comfortably walk through together. Maybe even two of us stacked on top of each other could walk through together. That's bringing this water in. We have 5 water treatment plants, amongst the largest in the nation. And this map here really focuses on the 3 pipelines that supply water to the peninsula. And as you can see on this map, these pipelines are coming from different places. You have access to both supplies, the supplies coming from Northern California and the Colorado River. You have access to water in our many reservoirs across Southern California. And there's a lot of capacity in these pipelines, almost 200,000 gallons per minute to bring water down to the peninsula. So a lot of great water infrastructure working for you in your area. And one of the other pieces of water infrastructure here in your area is one that you've all been talking about, and it's the Palos Verdes Reservoir. So this reservoir was constructed back in 1939. It's located on the corner of Palos Verdes Drive North and East in the city of Rolling Hills Estates. It's a treated water reservoir. So what that means is the water in there has already gone through a treatment plant, it's cleaned, it's been tested, and it's ready to get into your local distribution system and come out of pump faucets. And so back in 1987, we covered the reservoir to protect the water quality and for regulatory requirements. The other thing about this reservoir is it's not a reservoir in the traditional sense of like, we don't use it to store water for dry years. What it is it's used for operational flexibility. So for example, the reservoir is on the western end of our service area. So for example, let's say we're sending water down a pipeline and the demands for that water drop. The reservoirs kind of acts like an end of that pipeline. So water can kind of rest in there for a bit until those demands pick up and we could use that water again. The reservoir was put offline in 2009 to make upgrades to the liner and to the cover of the reservoir. We put it back in service in 2019 and used it intermittently between 2019 and 2022. And when we did, we faced some operational challenges. Our demands have dropped, and you all probably can understand this. I know we're all doing a really great job saving water at home. Our per capita water usage today is 45% less than what it was back in 1990. And so what we were finding was when we were using the reservoir, water was staying in there longer than we desired, than expected. And so that was causing potential water quality issues. So when we took it offline in 2022, we did because of some of those water quality challenges, but also because we were making upgrades to the feeder, the pipeline that feeds in, one of the pipelines that feeds into the reservoir. It's called the second lower feeder. So we took the reservoir offline to help facilitate those upgrades as well. But what we did do before we took it offline is we installed a bypass line. And that bypass line, this picture is a little bit more technical, but it's the orange line you see here. That bypass line works just like the reservoir does. It provides the same flow and pressure to our service connection to West Basin and Cal Water. And it's actually even better because we don't have to worry about any water quality issues using this bypass line. And so once these upgrades are done to the pipeline, we put this in, you can see it says temporary bypass line, but we are looking at keeping this permanently just to, again, provide that flexibility, that resiliency in our system. And we do not intend to put the reservoir back in service at this time. And we're determining what the long-term use of the reservoir could be, but this site is really important to us. You can see we've got 2 key pipelines, a couple of service connections, and it also serves as a hub for our maintenance and operations staff. And then I wanted to end with this image here. With the recent wildfires last month, fortunately, metropolitan facilities were not impacted, but several of our other member agencies and their sub-agencies were. And so we've obviously got expertise in water operations, but also in emergency operations. So we were working really closely with them to get water where they needed it, where they wanted it. We also provided mutual aid, equipment, supplies, crews to help out with restoration and recovery, and we continue to do that today. So I just want to leave you with that. Lots of water supplies available, flexibility and redundancy and resiliency in your operational system. And you've got 3 water agencies working for you. And so I want to introduce now Matt, who works West Basin Municipal Water District.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Vey with West Basin Municipal Water District. I know I'm on the water panel. I'm actually not really going to talk about water here, other than to say that we are the middleman in this process. We work very closely with Metropolitan Water District and Cal Water to bring drinking water to the peninsula. What I do want to talk about is to plug our firescaping workshops. If we could go to the next slide, please. Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't realize I was supposed to do that. Okay, and these are free workshops that we offer to communities in our service area that are at risk of wildfire. And the funding for this program actually comes from Metropolitan Water District. We also work very closely with Cal Water, with the city of Rancho Palos Verdes, and with LA County Fire to put on these workshops. We actually host the workshops here in this building. And if you come to one of our in-person workshops, we actually offer dinner, and we'll give away free books on firescaping if you're one of the folks who show up to these workshops. They're very informative. Chief Kane did a great job of telling you about some of the best practices for your home, and that's what these workshops are all about. They're all about fire hardening your home and your property, which includes the home itself, as Chief Kane kind of spoke to. It also includes 5 feet out from your house. It includes 30 feet out, kind of the space beyond the immediate perimeter of your house. And then we also get into fire-resistant landscaping and plants that you can use as part of your property. So I encourage you to show up for these. We usually get about 30 to 40 people. I would love to see us double that this year with the interest and with all the fires that are happening recently. We also have a website here that you can go to, westbasin.org/firescaping. We have a number of videos on there, about 15 minutes in length. If you're not able to attend one of our workshops, watch those videos. It'll give you a lot of information that you can apply at your house. Chief Kane showed one of those shots of the homes that was by itself, that was the only one unimpacted. I think it's very likely that that home was implementing some best practices around their home. And so that's what you will learn at these workshops. So I really encourage you to attend one, and feel free to talk to me afterward if you have any questions about these. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Kimberly Caballero, and I'm the Regional Public Affairs Manager for Cal Water. Here today we have Ralph Felix, our District Manager for the entire Rancho Dominguez District, Augustine Beza, our Operations Manager for the Palos Verdes system, and Carmelo Sorce, our Chief Engineering Officer, to share more information with you. So first, a little bit about Cal Water. We were established in 1926. We are the largest water utility regulated by the CPUC and the 3rd largest publicly traded water utility in the country. We serve 2 million Californians across 22 districts. And here in the Rancho Dominguez system, it's spread out throughout the South Bay. We have roughly 910 combined miles of water main. We serve more than 93,000 service connections, and we have almost 100 employees here. Here's our Palos Verdes service area. So we are the water utility of the entire Hill. We have more than 24,000 service connections here, more than 16 million gallons average day demand, and 341 miles of main, so that's more than a third of the total main in the district. Purchased water is our only supply, as Metropolitan Water District explained a little bit more about our source. And we've done some notable projects here, including the Palos Verdes Pipeline Water Reliability Project, the main replacement program, and our wildfire hardening, which we'll get into a little later. So thanks again to Metropolitan for explaining our source. Once it comes to us, the water is pumped up to the highest point on the peninsula, and it's delivered to customers from there. So we've gotten a lot of questions about fire hydrants, and our hydrant maintenance program includes two major components. So the first is an annual visual inspection of all fire hydrants. The fire hydrants here are pressurized, which means that any leaks would be visually noticeable. And between June of 2024 and the end of this month, we will have completed a visual inspection of every fire hydrant on the Hill. That's more than 2,500 fire hydrants. The next part of our program is a comprehensive maintenance that occurs every 5 years on every fire hydrant. And that includes replacing bolts and caps and other items as needed. Our water distribution network is a closed loop system, which means that our regular potable domestic water supply is the same supply for our fire hydrants. So looking at our infrastructure improvements, our main replacement program, that is, a program that is really always ongoing, where we replace high-risk aged main to ensure reliability. We've done a number of wildfire hardening projects through the peninsula, and we also installed generators to ensure power in the case of, an electric power shutoff. These projects improve grid resiliency, water quality, and fire flow capacity. Oh, that's a photo of a wildfire hardening project that we're doing in Rolling Hills. So the Palos Verdes Peninsula Water Reliability Project. We completed this in 2020, and it was about 2 decades in the making. So that included 7 miles of new water pipeline and a new pump station. That pump station is on a separate electric grid, and it's backed up by a generator. So that has just been very valuable to us. It created a lot of redundancy in our system. That was a project we were able to complete thanks to our partnership with the city, local businesses, and residents. We're very proud of that. Oops, sorry. That's some photos of our new pump station on Crenshaw, if you've driven by it. The helipod, we've discussed this, another project we're very proud of. I think the only thing that hasn't been mentioned is that it can be filled with any water connection. So our emergency response, again, we are the largest water utility regulated by the CPUC. So we have a lot of resources up and down the state, and we utilize them in cases of emergency. Our VP of Emergency Response is Daryl Osby, who many of you know as the former LA County Fire Chief. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge that we apply. One of our programs is our Emergency Operations Center, which is an annual training. We invite community leaders and stakeholders to that training. We also do annual trainings for our operations staff in emergency preparedness to ensure that everybody is ready. We have a lot of emergency equipment that we utilize, and that's strategically placed and stored in areas that are prone to wildfires. That includes portable boosters, portable generators, fire packs. These are backpacks that our employees can actually put on and put out small spot fires with them. We don't do any hot work, any drilling when there's a red flag warning. There's a lot of ways that we make sure to ensure the safety of our employees and the residents that we serve. And then I'd also like to address with vegetation management. So, as we've heard, vegetation management and road clearance is very important in cases of an emergency. We practice our own vegetation management on our sites. But if there's vegetation management that's occurring outside of our sites, that's out of our control and should be addressed by our city partners. And then we have a web page that talks about being water-wise and fire-wise, provides some guidance there. We also have our conservation programs that include our lawn to native garden rebates that you can learn about on our website. Many households in Palos Verdes are eligible for that. And also my contact information if you'd like to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. The water reliability project that was completed a few years back, I know how inconvenient it was for many of our residents and especially the motorists, as you were driving and all the traffic delays. But I think that redundancy that was put in place, it really paid off in terms of the inconvenience that we had to endure. So I think thank you for doing that for us. Also, in regards to the firescaping, those classes, we offer here in Hesse Park, we do offer it a couple times a year, and I think we'll have one in spring. And I've attended those classes, and there's a lot of great information on what you need to do in terms of how to landscape and how to harden your property. We were all coming to learn how flammable palm trees are, eucalyptus trees. These are all things that you need to walk around your property and look at the type of landscaping you have. I know I think it was in 2021, there was an assembly bill that passed that created the ember-free zone. They call it Zone 0. There's different zones that you're supposed to do fuel modification on your property. And that was enacted, but it was delayed in terms of the enforcement of it. And I recall when we started to notify residents about that ember-free zone, people were not happy with it and not happy with the lack of information. But in light of what we saw last month, a lot of people are now saying, I need to take out a lot of my landscaping in that first 5 feet around my structure. And as you've been hearing, those embers, many of those structures burn from the inside out, and it's the embers that cause the mass destruction. So take a look after tonight, inspect your property and see what you can take out in that first 5 feet, because that, if there is a fire and there are embers flying, at least it's creating this defensible space between your landscaping and your structure. So I'd like to now move on to the next segment of our town hall, and that's on the electric grid. And I'm going to introduce Selena Luna with Southern California Edison.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Selena Luna, Government Relations Manager at Southern California Edison. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight and making this topic a priority for your community. We're glad to be invited. Thank you, Aura. So a little bit about Southern California Edison's service territory. We have 50,000 square miles that we cover in our service area. About 27% of our service territory is considered a high wildfire risk area. And if you can see in the right-hand column, that is about 1.3 million of our 5 million accounts is in a high wildfire risk area. So we take wildfire prevention very, very seriously at Edison. We have about 1.5 million poles, and about 300,000 of them are in what we consider high wildfire risk areas. You can see from the map all the way in the corner that Rancho Palos Verdes is part of one of our high wildfire risk areas. And so in the next slides, you'll see the things that we implement in wildfire areas, which will include Rancho Palos Verdes. So Southern California Edison is required to submit a wildfire mitigation plan. We are currently in the middle of our 2023 to 2025 wildfire mitigation plan. We submitted our most recent update in April, and again last November. We will submit an additional update sometime this year. So we employ infrastructure bolstering, we do situational awareness, and we use a lot of modern data and technology to predict and assist our, predict and assist in wildfire mitigation. So that includes hardening our electric grid, enhancing our operational practices, and doing situational awareness. And what exactly does this mean? This means that we have, over the course of the last 5 years, enhanced our ability to harden our grid. So when we first had our first wildfire mitigation plan, we worked on just hardening our grid and enhancing our operational practices. And now we've actually implemented our calculated risk and our PSPS. And for those of you that don't know, public safety power shutoffs are when we use as a tool of last resort, we actually shut your power off to stop a wildfire from occurring. I can't move the slide, there we go. So how do we reduce wildfire risk in your community? We have what's called covered conductors. We install, hardening on the actual power pole, so we have real-time sensoring. We install what's called remote automatic reclosers, and that is when we sense an anomaly on your line, the line will actually shut off for safety. So in many of the poles and structures here in Rancho Palos Verdes, when there's a wind event and say a palm frond or an animal steps on the line, that's when you will experience a power outage in your neighborhood. And that tells us that there was an anomaly on your line and that we have to go inspect it for safety. So those of you, we get a lot of calls up at the very top of the hill because we have the most sensitive sensors there for wildfire risk. And those are part of our risk module. So when you experience frequent outages, it's actually our ability to safety check your neighborhood. So here's the anatomy of a pole, and you can see the actual pole has fire safety wraps on it. The top of the pole is where we have the covered conductor going across the wire. We also have early fault detection, which is the thing you see down in the middle of the pole line. And then our transformer is also fire retardant. So we have different functions along the lines. And most recently in the landslide area, we installed additional sensors, which are called rapid detection sensors, in order to better have real-time knowledge of what was happening in your community. And so when we reduce our wildfire risk across our service territory, that involves covered conductor. Every new project that we have in the community, Rancho Palos Verdes included, is by covered conductor, which is where we put a protective covering on the wire, which allows the wire to be safe from arcing or items coming in contact with it. We also inspect our trees and remove vegetation. We most recently did a project near Klondike Canyon in Rancho Palos Verdes to remove additional vegetation. We do this annually. You can also call us and request an inspection off-cycle, and we will go and remove any vegetation that runs the risk of coming in contact with our line. We also do drone and aerial inspections. We currently do air operations weekly in Rancho Palos Verdes because of the landslide area. So we're doing advanced LiDAR and drone work to better inform us of what's happening in your neighborhoods. We also have 190 wildfire cameras. We can port into other cameras owned by CAL FIRE, et cetera. And we have real-time weather stations. We have quite a few on the peninsula that help us to detect what your real-time weather is and what the wildfire risk would be in your neighborhood. So to continue, we do grid hardening, we do high fire risk inspections, we do vegetation management, the public safety power shutoffs, and situational awareness. So we have real-time monitors in all of our substations across Rancho Palos Verdes. That would be the top of the hill, over in Marilest, over by the fire station and Terranea Resort, and also in a substation in San Pedro that serves Rancho Palos Verdes. Some of the covered conductor work we've completed recently has been over in the Marilest area in Rolling Hills. We have future projects coming over here by Terranea, and then when we do what's called grid improvements, cutovers to improve the capacity of the grid, we are also doing all of those projects in covered conductor so that the wires in your neighborhood are no longer bare wire, and that helps us to reduce wildfire risk. So I talked about vegetation management, the public safety power shutoffs that we use, and we have the overhead equipment, as I mentioned earlier, on our lines that help us remediate any wildfire risk in your neighborhood. How can you learn more about your community and if you're impacted by a PSPS shutoff? We encourage you to sign up on your account for real-time alerts. We will notify you 5 days in advance, 72 hours in advance, 24 hours in advance, and 12 hours in advance, and then when it would be imminent that your community would be shut off. It's been quite some time since we've done a shut off in Rancho Palos Verdes, but it could be possible if the right conditions exist as a measure of last resort, as a safety measure for your community. So how can you learn more? You can go to sce.com/wildfire. You can stay informed by visiting that website. Sign up on your account for active outage alerts. This would be for a maintenance outage and/or a public safety power shutoff. We also encourage you to be prepared with a safety preparedness plan for your family. Thank you so much.
I should have said this at the beginning, but we will upload the PowerPoint, which has a lot of valuable information on the city's website after this evening. So you may want to check the city's website by tomorrow morning. It should be up and ready. I know Southern California Edison primarily considers themselves an above-ground utility. And many times people in certain neighborhoods come together and they approach the city and they say, what can we do to consider undergrounding? We have a handbook at the Public Works Department on what you could do to underground. It is costly, and you could form a district to help fund the undergrounding, but if you want more information, go to the city's website for Public Works for information on undergrounding. And many of you have heard me speak over the last couple years, if not longer, about the landslide. I should just say one of the silver linings in this landslide, and you know, we're very fortunate that over the last 25 years, we've acquired 1,500 acres of open space that is protected in perpetuity through federal, state, and county funding and other generous donations from you, the residents. But because of the landslide in one of our highest risk areas, we were able to decommission 40 utility poles and take those out. So we reduced that risk from any type of wildfire being sparked by above ground utilities because of the landslide. So if there's anything that came out of that landslide, is probably the removal of those poles. So the next segment of the town hall this evening is on city readiness. And before I introduce the Director of Public Works, who's going to talk about our fuel modification in the open space area that the city owns, I do want to mention that as a city and as what we do to prepare and to try to minimize that risk, whenever there's a red flag warning, you probably receive some sort of announcement on your phone. And if you don't have the MyRPV app, I'm asking you to download that app before you leave tonight. In fact, while I'm speaking, you could download it. And some of the other platforms that we use, but we send out listservs. And one of the things that we do when we see in the forecast that there's a red flag warning and there's a high risk of a potential wildfire, we want to reduce that risk. And so what we do is we are now closing the open space areas and all the trails and trailheads, and we use our rangers to patrol it. And we're not, I know that may be inconvenient for people who want to go for their hikes, but we're trying to reduce that risk because sometimes some people come out and they're not here for good reasons and they're here to cause problems. And I also want to remind you that we as a community need to be watching all the time. And there's, through LA County, there's Arson Watch. And if you see something, you need to report it, and you need to report it to the Sheriff's Department and report it to Arson Watch. In addition to that, we also are now requiring that all landscape equipment during red flag warnings be stopped, that you not use your leaf blowers, your weed trimmers, anything that's gas powered or electric powered. We're asking you to stop so you avoid any sparks that could cause a wildfire. So pay attention. You'll see those announcements whenever we feel like the weather is at that point. So now I'm going to introduce the Director of Public Works, Ramsey Awad, to talk about our fuel modification zones.
Good evening. I'm Ramsey Watt, Director of Public Works, and I'll talk about the city's annual fuel modification program. The program is conducted annually in advance of traditional fire season, completed in June, and it is for city parcels, primarily focused on open space areas. We use multiple methods. One is goat, one is goat grazing, but another important method is hand-operated machinery crews, depending on the location. So we use both methods. The work is based on guidance from the fire department, and it uses the multiple zones. But within 200 feet of structures, we remove dead vegetation, we thin and uplimb shrubs and trees, and we also do work within 10 feet along roadways. This is not a clearing operation. We don't clear completely, and especially on slopes, because we do want to avoid soil erosion and mud flows that can result if we do complete clearing, as we saw north of us. We do, in certain locations, come back. If there is significant regrowth or if there are other reasons, we will come back and remove additional vegetation after traditional fire season. And as I mentioned earlier, the program is primarily focused on open space areas. There are maps that show the work that we do on the annual basis, and we will be posting these maps on the city website and working up an interactive GIS version so that folks can zoom in to the areas of greatest interest. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation to make sure we have enough time for Q&A this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramsey. I'd like to just add, the maps that you saw were not just generated by the city and had some arbitrary lines drawn. We actually, almost 15 years ago, started discussions with LA County Fire Department, the Forestry Division, and came up with the maps that you see on you saw on the screen here. They essentially require that we do 200 feet of clearance around a structure, any combustible structure, and then along our roadways. Many people are always concerned about people who flick their cigarettes out, and that sparks. And so the minimum required clearance is 10 feet from the curb, and we do that as well. So our crews go out there, and you see the goats. The goats are there for a reason. I know everyone loves the goats, but the goats are there for a reason, and we bring them out at a certain time of the season, and they go to all of our open space areas, and very effective. We've been using the goats for almost a decade now, and I know a lot of other municipalities are doing the same, as well as some private businesses, because of how effective they are. So we are now at, let me see where we are at the program here. So I think this is something that we have been discussing here on the Palos Verdes Peninsula and Rancho Palos Verdes for some time now. It has to do with fire insurance. And as you know, we are a very high fire severity zone. And because of that, even though it wasn't designed that way with that mapping by CAL FIRE, it has had unintended consequences when it comes to fire insurance. And the city council has been talking about this. It's one of our legislative platforms to make sure, and it has been for almost a decade now, to make sure that we as residents are doing our part to lower our risk, which then we think should keep our insurance rates in check. In fact, through the Emergency Preparedness Committee, they have come up with strategies and a letter that you can download and send to your insurance company saying, this is what the city does to reduce its risk, and this is what I've done. That template letter is available on the city's website. You can go to the Emergency Preparedness Committee homepage to download it. We designed it in a way where it's a template letter. All you need to do is submit it to your insurance carrier, and hopefully you can get a discounted rate. But discounts are not even something that we are thinking about now. We just want to keep our policies, and we don't want to get a non-renewal notice, and then we want to kind of keep the costs in check too. And I know I know firsthand that when you buy in a high fire severity zone, you can't get fire insurance. You have to get insurance through the FAIR plan and then get a difference in coverage for the rest of your property. So we're very fortunate that we're able to get someone from the Department of Insurance to come from the state. So Rob, you're up next.
Thank you, everyone. Just going to skip forward to the slides. Okay, so thank you all for having me today. My name is Rob Obedoza. I am the outreach analyst for the Department of Insurance for here in Rancho Palos Verdes, and I'm here to talk about fire insurance, you know, some of the availability concerns and what the state is doing to kind of address those concerns as far as fire insurance goes. And, you know, in addition to being the lead for the Department of Insurance for this area, I've also been the lead for the Department of Insurance for the Palisades area. So we've been seeing firsthand exactly how fire insurance is helping support the rebuilding process, whether it's, you know, homes being rebuilt. If someone chooses to rebuild elsewhere outside of Palisades, they can have those costs covered as well. Debris removal covered at no cost in conjunction with the LA County debris removal program, contents coverage, loss of use or additional living expenses if your home is no longer habitable. So there's a lot of benefits to having that fire insurance, but of course, as has been reiterated, the issue is availability of insurance. And, you know, as wildfire risk has heightened in California in the past few years, as California has suffered some of its most devastating wildfires in its state's history, the insurance companies are taking a look at that and saying, you know, right now it's not worth it for us to cover fire insurance in certain high-risk areas. So we're starting to see a lot of people, as had mentioned, going towards the FAIR plan, which is the insurer of last resort. And initially, the FAIR plan was intended for super high-risk properties that just couldn't get fire insurance anywhere else. And even with the FAIR plan, you would still need, as they had mentioned, a difference in conditions policy. And as in the past few years, the number of policies on the FAIR plan has more than tripled, becoming the option of first resort as opposed to the last resort. And on the FAIR plan, you know, you're paying more for less coverage. And, you know, the biggest reason for this is insurance companies haven't been able to assess risk properly when it comes to wildfire risk within the state of California. And when it comes to the root cause of those issues, again, is that wildfire risk that we've been reiterating throughout tonight's presentations. So, you know, to address the mitigation efforts that need to be taken by homeowners and communities, a few years ago, Commissioner Ricardo Lara implemented what's called the Safer from Wildfires regulation, which is designed to help attack the root cause of some of these insurance issues, which is wildfire risk, by helping homeowners protect their home or business, protecting their immediate surroundings, and extending that out to protecting their whole community. Now, along with these Safer from Wildfires framework, the commissioner introduced first in the nation discounts, as they had mentioned, for following some of these steps of these Safer from Wildfires regulations. So if you've done some home hardening, if you've got the proper roof, you can talk to your insurance company about getting discounts on your wildfire policy for having those things in place. We also implemented transparency in the wildfire risk score process, where your wildfire risk score is kind of similar to your credit score, where your, the worse your wildfire risk is, or wildfire score is, the less appealing or insurable your property is going to be. And with these regulations, you are able to contact your insurance company and get that wildfire risk score to assess your home's wildfire risk. Now, the Safer from Wildfires framework is a 10-step process to help reduce wildfire risk in your home by up to 70% if taken as a whole. And a lot of these are some of the things that the fire chief had mentioned earlier, which is having the proper Class A fire roof, having a 5-foot ember-resistant zone around the structure, which is that Zone 0 defensible space, having non-combustible 6 inches at the bottom of your home, ember and fire resistant vents to protect against those flying embers, double pane windows or added shutters, and having enclosed eaves. Now, the next step in the Safer from Wildfires framework extends out from the home into your immediate surroundings. So this includes clearing vegetation and debris from under your decks, moving sheds and outbuildings at least 30 feet away, and trimming trees and removing brush in compliance with local and state defensible space laws. And in addition to that, when we extend out from your home or property, we extend the wildfire mitigation throughout the community. So forming a FireWise USA community, being part of a fire risk reduction community, helping your community and your neighbors reduce that fuel within your neighborhood, helping your neighbors reduce their wildfire risk as well. By joining and becoming part of a wildfire or a fire risk reduction community or a FireWise USA community can also open up grants and funding available for your community to work towards that community level mitigation as well. So again, with those safer from wildfire regulations, the aim is to reduce wildfire risk within your home, surrounding your home, and surrounding your communities as well. Now, on the statewide level, the commissioners also introduced what's called the Sustainable Insurance Strategy, which is a set of changes and modifications to Prop 103 to help modernize the California insurance market and make insurance more accessible for Californians and bringing those options back into those high fire risk areas, creating a resilient insurance market so we don't slide back into the current issues that we have right now, and protecting communities from climate change. Now, these regulations, they were finalized in December 2024, and part of these regulations, in order for insurance companies to continue doing business and using some of the tools that we've implemented that they've been asking for within California for quite some time now, insurance companies are required to write no less than 85% of homes and businesses in distress areas as identified by the California Insurance Commissioner. So basically, in order to use some of these tools, they're gonna have to increase their market share within those high fire risk areas. And the goal of the Sustainable Insurance Strategy is to return fair plan policyholders back into the open insurance market. So again, a growing fair plan is not something that we want to see within the state of California. Again, you're paying more for less coverage. So as those insurance options open back up with these new regulations, first priority will be given to those who have been following those safer from wildfires regulations back into the open insurance market. The biggest thing we introduced are what are called CAT models, or catastrophe modeling, which is a more modern data-driven approach to risk assessment. California was one of the only few states that still used what are called historical models for risk assessment, which is basically, as I mentioned, in the past 20 years, California has some of its most devastating wildfires in its state history. So in the past, insurance companies would take a look at those past 20 years, project that to keep happening again and again in the future. But with these new catastrophe modelings, they'll be able to take into account things like the home hardening, the risk mitigation that communities are doing, mitigation efforts being done across the state, where your fire hydrant is, local fire hydrant is located in proximity to your home, where the local fire breaks are, and take that into account to properly assess risk within the state of California. We're also looking at modernizing the FAIR Plan. In the past, the FAIR Plan was not even, especially here in Southern California, was not meeting the demands of its California consumers. So we've expanded commercial coverage limits to 20 million per structure, which closes coverage gaps for HOAs, affordable housing, and infill developments. Now, as I had said, all these regulations went into effect in December 2024, and the insurance commissioner, he expects these options to start opening back up around the middle of 2025. Now, the big question is, all these regulations were passed in December 2024. A month later, the wildfires hit. And, a lot of people are wondering, how that's going to affect the California's insurance market. And frankly, right now, we have no idea how that's going to play out. It's going to be some time before we get all of the data to assess how this market is going to be affected. However, the commissioner, along with several elected officials across the state of California, have already taken action, and the commissioner has recently sponsored 10 proposed bills to help Californians reduce that wildfire risk and address and keep those insurance options available. Some of those bills include providing tax-free grants for wildfire mitigation, includes expanding the insurance moratorium to commercial properties, not requiring an inventory list in the event that your home was devastated, so that your contents coverage can be paid out immediately without having to give an itemized inventory, certain tax breaks as well, and amongst certain other things that are being sponsored. So the state's definitely taking a look at this. The commissioner has definitely taken a look at this and is taking action to make changes to make sure those insurance options remain available within California. And, you know, in addition to implementing these regulations, we are the state agency and consumer protection agency for you and your insurance company. So if you're having any issues with your insurance company, if they're not calling you back, if you don't agree with your adjuster, if your claim is a lot less than what you had anticipated, give us a call at our 800 number at 1-800-927-4357, or visit us at insurance.ca.gov, sign up for our consumer alert, stay up to date on some of the changes that are being implemented and how the insurance market is changing in the near future. So that's all I have today. I'll stick around and answer any questions that we've got.
Thank you, Rob. So you heard earlier in the program about evacuation, and so we've got our captain from the Lomita station, Captain Kimberly Guerrero, who's going to speak about the evacuation plan for a fire.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. I'm Kimberly Guerrero. I'm the captain at Lomita Station, and that is your law enforcement agency. You know, 2025 really hit home for us. As a department, we recently experienced two major destructive wildfires in the Eaton and Palisades fire. Our Altadena station was right in the middle of the Eaton fire, and our partner's fire actually helped save our station. So we know firsthand what it's all about to be in the middle of these wildfires. We know that it takes many lives, took many lives, and it destroyed properties, prompting mass evacuations. We all know climate change is here. Our department knows that. We know that as a law enforcement agency. So that's okay. We know that we're going to experience more and more of these major incidences, not just wildfires, but earthquakes, floods, et cetera. We know RPV, and we acknowledge that it is a very high fire hazard severity zone. So I'm not going to talk in depth about what our role is. I actually brought my team here who will present the presentation because they know firsthand. They were out there at the Eaton and Palisades fire, exactly what went down, the lessons learned, and any questions that you may have. They know firsthand and have the knowledge of those wildfires. So I'm going to let them go into depth, a little bit more in depth, not too much, because we'd rather answer your questions. But just to let you know, our responsibilities is obviously to save lives. That's our number one priority. Our other responsibilities are also swift evacuation strategies, communicating effectively with you, the residents out in the community. Looter prevention, obviously you've seen on TV, that was one of our main priorities in the Eaton and Palisades fires. Also collaborating with our interagencies, you know, Cal Water, SCE, Fire, all our outside entities and outside agencies. Training, we're in constant training and continuing the training and utilizing technology, which we will have our drones out soon to assist us with incidents such as these. So let me introduce to you Deputy Clotworthy, Sergeant McCoy. They'll go more in depth into the presentation, and if you have any questions, we'll be here to answer them. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Derek Clotworthy. I'm your Community Relations Deputy. Thank you, Captain. Before I get started, also thank you to Chief Kane for his presentation. He kind of hit the nail on the head in our role in evacuation. We're going to work very closely with the fire department, and he summed up our role so eloquently. Hold on, let me refer here to my first slide. This kind of goes without saying. You mentioned it already. Fire incidents are dynamic. They're rapidly evolving. And ultimately, the unique circumstances of those incidents are going to determine the unique actions that we take. So I can't get up here today and tell you, hey, this is going to be your exact route of evacuation, or this is going to be the reason or zone, because it's going to be evolving, and we'll respond accordingly. what you are going to see from us, right? He mentioned it already. You have the Genesis Protect app, and then you also have the alert, the notification systems that the county already utilizes, those push notifications to your phones. But in the event of a true emergency, you're still going to have deputy sheriffs going door to door. They're going to be driving around their patrol cars, and they're going to be on their PAs, and they're going to be telling you, hey, it's time to evacuate. Yes, you're going to utilize that technology, right? It's going to augment our ability to evacuate a zone effectively, but you still will get deputy sheriffs responding and letting you know when it's time to go, right? Deputies are aware of the points of ingress and egress into our community, right? We utilize those routes all the time. We're not responding to fires every day, right? But we fight crime. And when we have crimes in progress, it is very routine for deputies to, recognize those points on our community and put deputies at those fixed locations and then begin searching for those people if we believe that the crime is in progress and that there's reason to believe that they're still in our jurisdiction. So deputies are aware of that. It's very common practice for us to be at those intersections. So in the event of an emergency, I'm gonna have to skip around here because some of my stuff's already been touched upon. We're gonna send those deputies to those units or to those intersections. Because it's gonna be rapid and dynamic and rapidly evolving, I can't tell you exactly what we're going to do when we get there. It might be that we're gonna have to partner with Public Works, shut down those intersections, the lights, and have deputies actually directing traffic out of there. I assure you that we have adequate staffing at our station, right? But our most valuable resource, again, is our deputies. And in a critical situation such as this, we're going to request mutual aid from our sister stations. We already do this on a regular basis. A fire incident would be no different. If that decision's made, we have our sister stations Carson, we've got Century, we've got Linwood, we've got South LA, and again, this is very routine for us. When we're handling other critical incidences, crimes in progress, we have reason to believe that people are fleeing from us. Whatever it may be, we request that mutual aid and those deputies respond. Code 3, lights and sirens. Our response times in your community are very, very low. Any fire call that we receive is going to prompt a Code 3 response from us. And our emergent response times are about 3 to 5 minutes on average, right? So you can expect deputies to be there on scene almost immediately. A fire like this, of this magnitude, it's gonna take time to start, right? You're not gonna go from a small house fire to Palisades or Eaton fire catastrophe within minutes. The deputies can mobilize fast enough to get there to control traffic. Chief Kane had mentioned the Genesis Protect, and he'd also mentioned how important it was for our community to be on board with that technology. We utilize that, all right? Every deputy is issued a county cell phone, and we all have that application on our phone, right? It's valuable for us to be able to communicate with fire and know exactly what zone we need to evacuate, right? But the reason it's so important for you to know as well is so that we don't have those bottleneck incidents, right? Like that we saw from our cities up north, right? Those evacuation notifications are going to be made in a very systematic process, and that decision is going to be made by our incident management team. An incident management team is going to be formed when we believe that a fire has escalated to the point that it requires a larger coordinated effort from the members of our department. So when you are on that application, right, if it's not telling you to evacuate, it might be to our benefit for you to not just go and jump the gun and evacuate yourself, right? Because in doing so, you might make it more difficult for another region, another zone that truly does need to evacuate to be able to leave our jurisdiction. Again, like I said, I can't really give you any more specifics other than that. I can kind of give you the insights into how we operate. And again, our most valuable resource is a manpower. This is a department of 8,000 deputies sworn strong. And We demonstrated it in the recent fires. We were able to mobilize thousands of deputies from the entire department within, just a few hours. I imagine that would be no different for our community here. What you have on the screen now are a couple lists of resources that I recommend that you all look into. We have county resources that will give you shelter information, alerts. We also have information for, where potential evacuation sites, where you can get information on potential evacuation sites in a critical incident. Again, those aren't things that I can tell you here today, right? Because a situation would be, again, rapidly evolving, and we may identify a local, maybe park or school or church as a potential evacuation site. But if this is something that escalates into a calamity that envelops the entire peninsula, we might have to start reaching out to some of our sister cities for additional sites. So it's going to be really important that you utilize these resources for those notifications. And then, as mentioned previously, you have to follow us on social media and some of these other media outlets so that you can get this crucial information in real time. We'll be here for questions after.
So we're nearing the end of the program. I know we've gone over in time. I just want to kind of summarize that you heard from Public Safety, both LA County Fire and LA County Sheriff's Department. The first and most important thing that they, when they respond to an incident, is saving lives. That's the first. And many times people are asking the city, we need an evacuation plan. What's our evacuation plan? We need to know where to go. No, we don't need an evacuation plan. We need an evacuation playbook that tells us how we evacuate. But as you heard this evening, when you are asked to evacuate, it's based on an incident. The last thing we want to do is direct you in the line of an incident. So it's always going to be incident-based. I know with the fires that happened in January, many of us downloaded the Watch Duty app. I did. Everybody was using it. In fact, it seemed like it was much more user-friendly than all the other apps. But what's interesting with the Watch Duty app, it uses the same base map as the Genesis map, which is the map that the Peninsula cities use for our evacuation notifications. And also, evacuations are also their warnings and their orders. And so you need to understand the two differences, and they're color coded so that you understand that as well. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that. And what I'm going to do, at the end here, we're going to wrap things up. And so I'm going to invite our emergency management coordinator. You all need to know Luna. Luna is the one who oversees for Rancho Palos Verdes, works closely with the Emergency Preparedness Committee, with you, holds workshops all on emergency preparedness. So the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Aaron. So I want to briefly talk to you guys about the disaster cycle and some RPV-specific places to find emergency information. Starting with the disaster cycle, as you can see, it is a cycle. It does kind of meld into each other, but when we talk about any disaster, especially wildfires, but any disaster, we're talking about everything from prevention and mitigation to preparedness, response, and recovery. When we talk about prevention, doing things like during a red flag warning, not using power tools or ashing out your cigarette while you're driving around well, anywhere, honestly, ash it inside, but we can prevent wildfires, some of them. We can mitigate some by having defensible space, home hardening, Chief Kane spoke about that, and preparedness. And when we talk about preparedness, everyone is responsible for their own preparedness. You are responsible for figuring out where you should go if you need to evacuate, where you should keep yourself safe if you can't evacuate, what you should bring with you, how you're gonna get there, just as the city is responsible for managing all of the things that the city does during an emergency. That personal responsibility is really, really important, and stepping up beforehand, we can prevent what we can reduce the risk, but if something were to happen, what will you do?
practice. Practice that over and over. Easiest way to make a plan, easiest way to make an emergency kit is to practice, is to pretend something's happening and say, what would I do? And actually physically try to do it. Include pets, include children, because if your dog is going into a crate for the first time when there's a wildfire, you are less likely to be able to get them into that crate. If it's a normal thing that you do every time you go to the park and you do a drill every 6 months, you're gonna do a better job of getting everybody out and preventing psychological trauma of an emergency, preventing it from being a trauma and just having it be an experience. When we talk about response, if you receive an evacuation warning, be ready to go. If you need time to leave, leave. If you are not able to have those plans in place on where can I go to stay safe, that immediate response. If you see a fire, I live in Sierra Madre. I saw the fire coming. I had my stuff in my car. I was ready to go before evacuation warning came up. And if I felt unsafe, I'm not waiting for anything. I am leaving. I'm not waiting for someone to tell me. I'm taking that control and that responsibility in my hand. And when we talk about recovery, this is really a cycle. When I'm thinking about when I'm leaving, I'm thinking I need to show a proof of where I live so I might be able to get back in, because the sheriff may have some checkpoints to make sure that people don't come and create a public safety hazard. So kind of keeping in that whole spectrum of different things that you should do to prepare. The city is doing what we can to prepare. We are working on our hazard mitigation plan. We do have an emergency operations plan that we are currently updating, and we will be working on a regional evacuation plan, mass care and evacuation plan with the other peninsula cities once we're done with the hazard mitigation plan. That's not to say that we don't have things in place. That's just to facilitate that regional coordination so that we are more efficient when we're responding to an emergency. So I do want to just talk a little about the different RPV-specific emergency information. Our partners showed you some great county information, some great agency-specific information, but the number one thing, please do this. If you do anything else today, please sign up for Alert South Bay. This is our area's alert system. This is how we're gonna give you local emergency information and alerts. Sign up for the calls, sign up for every location you care about. If you have other family in the area, sign up for them too, so that you're alerted. I'm signed up for my mother in New Jersey with their alert system because I wanna know what's going on when something happens with her. www.alertsouthbay.com. You can sign up for email, text, phone calls. Again, I recommend the phone calls. Be woken up in the middle of the night if there's an evacuation warning or order. Know before something happens. Alert South Bay is an opt-in system. If you don't register, you're not getting the alert. The alerts you guys received, the erroneous alerts that everybody received were from what we call a WIA, a wireless emergency alert. And these are not opt-in, but we don't always use these. And these are, you can use them for any area, but they're not as geo-fenced as we do with Alert South Bay. So the city, the local information, this is the best way to receive that information, and we won't always push a WIA. Sometimes we'll push an Alert South Bay message if something is important for you guys to know about an emergency, but not necessarily is like, get out now, get out now. WIAs are more of kind of like that sound the alarm kind of thing, right? Not to say we won't also push that on Alert South Bay, and we push those together. We can get those out at the same exact time. So pvpready.gov is the peninsula's website for, one, hosting the Genesis map that a few of the responders had spoken about. So that map is housed there, and you can go on there, you can learn your zone, you can learn the status of your zone, and when something's happening, you'll know what to do from that map. If you happen to receive an erroneous alert and you wanted to know if you were safe, this is the best place to go. pvpready.gov, you'll be able to see the map, and that's gonna show you if you're actually in danger. And you're gonna say, oh wait, I'm not in an evacuation warning. That is gonna be updated as quickly as we're pushing things out as alerts, they're going to be there as well. So really good site to utilize for that information. It also includes preparedness information. So if you want to learn a little bit more about preparing specifically for the peninsula, it is our one-stop shop to go. We're adding information to it every day. If you ever want to give a recommendation, you're welcome to email me and I'll work on some edits. We're actively working on that. Then our websites, my RPV app, our social media, these are our next line of defense. We're gonna be pushing out from Alert South Bay and PVP Ready. Those are our #1 places. That PVP Ready is proactive. You're looking for information versus Alert South Bay. We're actively giving you information, you're just gonna be reacting to it. But the additional information will always be on our website. We'll have a banner for the emergency that will navigate you to that web page. Same thing with the MyRPV app, you'll get those push notifications, and our social media will keep you looped into. And then what happens if the power's out? Radio was really big with the Palisades fires, with Altadena fire, the Eden fire, excuse me, I should call them by their names, but it was really crucial, and when power is out, radio is reliable. Right outside, there's some free NOAA weather radios. That's one of the ways you can get information. Up there's a few other channels, local channels, where you would get that same emergency information. So really good resources to have. Now, you guys probably heard of Watch Duty. That's something that is fire specific. If I want to learn about all the regional information about a wildfire, I can go on that app. It's not localized to RPV, but it is a general one. Same thing kind of goes for earthquakes. My Shake is kind of our earthquake app. So there are additional resources out there. There's a lot of resources out there. I recommend these for RPV specifically. And aside from that, just a couple other things. There was a question about what's the timeline between a warning and an order. There is none. Every incident is specific to that incident, which means you may never receive a warning. It may just hop to an order. You may never receive anything and the fire's already there because it happened right down the block from you and the wind sparked it up before anyone knew it was happening. So if you feel in danger, leave. Don't wait for a warning. Don't wait for an order. But those warnings and orders can be very helpful, so take them seriously and don't wait around. We do have areas in the peninsula that are single ingress and egress. One exit, one entrance. So you wanna move as quickly as you can if something major is happening. When there is time, there may be door knocks, there may be speakers. The sheriff may direct you one way or another, but these resources are our key line of pushing information out quickly, especially when there's not a lot of time. With that said, I want to move on to questions. We received 100 questions online. I'm not going through 100 questions with you, but I promise you that all of the questions, we are going to get you answers. We're going to get them online. So anything that's not addressed, if your question is not addressed right now, please don't panic. I promise you we're not dismissing your questions, and we will come back to those and have those posted online if they're not addressed today. If we could just start, if anyone does have questions, I'm gonna read a couple first, but if you could start forming a queue behind the mic, if you do have any questions, and I'll read through a couple and then we can start taking some from the line and we can hop back and forth. And if you're online, you're welcome to submit something. We're not gonna be answering in real time, but I will include those in that list when we post. So if you're online, you're welcome to still ask your questions. Just don't expect the answers to be this second. We will get back to those. So with that said, I'm gonna just start with a question about what are the city or fire department in the area, what are the ordinances and guidelines for defensible space? And what kind of support and/or enforcement is there to try to get people to adhere to those defensible space guidelines? Chief Kane, do you want to take that one?
So all of the guidelines are previously set in. This document here outlines everything as it relates to defensible space and your respective address. It tells everything about all the zones, what should be in those zones, what shouldn't be in those zones, home hardening techniques. Everything is here, or there is a web address where you can find the information that you're looking for. If you're having difficulty navigating this document or the website, you can also call your local fire station and they will help guide you through this document here. In June 1st, we will start our enforcement processes with everything that is related within this document here and the respective zones and the brush clearance that it is supposed to be finished and per the policy as stated in this document here on June 1st. And that will take us through to the end of June. And you should be getting some door hangers soon as it relates to the brush inspection and clearances that are coming for this respective season.
Sir, if you would like to ask your question, you're welcome to.
Testing. Okay, first off, I want to thank you all for being here today. Just the professionalism that I see and the passion you have in your jobs, all of you, has been quite impressive. So I want to thank you for being out here. Thank you very much. So one of the areas I'd like to talk about is about, what are the weak links that, in all this process? Because you're all in your areas are very knowledgeable and planned everything out. And one of the weakest links I see is basically me and the residents. I mean, you guys all have presentations. What are we presenting? It's our homes, and I've got a shed next to my house. I'm supposed to move it 20 feet out. Well, I have to put it in my neighbor's yard or in the front yard, in the street. So, those are the things that we need to do as residents, and who's standing up for us and making sure that we are all in line with making sure that we've got shrubbery away from our houses, because if our neighbor's house goes up, our house probably goes up. So that's the weakest link that I see. And I don't know what you guys are thinking. Maybe you're thinking that, or you know that. But how do we get ourselves in line? I'm not asking for an answer today, but I'm just thinking, how do we get ourselves in line to make sure that we have defensible structures everywhere? Do we all agree that we should do that? Yeah, so I think the people that are here are on top of it, but there are not a lot of people that are here. So they're even weaker links than us, guys. I'm going to say that. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, within agencies, and I've seen it a lot of times, is in between two agencies, there's that in between the agency could be a weak link. You know what those may or may not be. So I just kind of implore you to keep working through finding those things that, it's fire, it's water, it's police, it's electrical, it's insurance. So one of those areas, like if you play pickleball or tennis, right down the middle is a problem because it's yours. No, it's yours. So keep working on those. And then the last thing is with the reservoir. I was shocked to find out that thing's empty. You guys are shocked as well? What do you mean? It's water. What's that? Do you want to have water here or not? No, here's the thing is if I look at the map, I did listen to it, sir. If you look at the map, we're the end of the line for the water for all of LA County. And so if the water gets used in LA County or somewhere else, water never gets here. We're the end of the line. So I'm kind of surprised that, wait a second, LA County could take the water, other people could take the water, and then we'd be the end of the line. So I think that's and politically, if there is a big fire here like a Palisades, that's a kind of a problem for you guys to face. Like, wait, you had a reservoir here and it wasn't filled. He's going to say, it wasn't for fire, but there's a reservoir that was built here for a reason. So I highly implore you guys to figure out a way, even if you just open up as a lake or something, but I'd rather have water here at the end of the line. Thank you.
maybe someone from maybe Rupan, you can comment on that. But I do want to say, you just saying that you as a resident are the weakest link is actually you being aware, and all of you that are here, you're one step closer to being better prepared. And the one thing that I would like to add before we respond to your question regarding the reservoir, it is so important to be situationally aware. When that erroneous alert came out, many people started to panic, but if you actually stopped and looked around your environment, you probably were like, there's no smoke, there's nothing. This must be a false alarm or something went wrong. That's what happened to me. I wasn't here on the peninsula when that happened. I was talking to my neighbors and they were like, I'm like, wait, there's nothing going on around. Be situationally aware, be vigilant. Rupen, do you want to be able to answer that? Sure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keith Nobriga from Metropolitan Water District and the Operations Group Manager. And I just wanted to address the gentleman's question about the water to the reservoir. So I'm trying to put this in a perspective that you guys could understand. But right now, our system in the winter is delivering 1,000 CFS roughly to all of Southern California, that a broad pipe network across all of Southern California to 19 million people. The system designed to deliver about 3,000, 4,000 CFS. Because we have so much great conservation across the region to handle droughts, our system's really over-designed because it was designed back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when they thought the demand would get a lot higher. So now to bring it to the peninsula, we have, as Rupam said, 3 major lines that are delivering water here. And the connections, and that connected capacity is over 200 CFS delivery capacity to this area. And then we work with West Basin and Cal Water. Cal Water's total connections, if they were to max them all out, is 115 CFS. Their demand in January on average was 20 CFS. So they need 20 on average before the fire. We have 115 capacity. So we could bring even more. And typically the fire doesn't, double your demand. So there's a lot of capacity. The specific pipe that would service the reservoir, like Rupam said, if we keep the reservoir full all the time, the water quality goes bad, you can't drink it. So it's kind of one of those engineer's dilemmas, right? It's like, I keep full of water for the fire that might come someday, but then you can't use it every day for drinking. But that pipe that we put through, it can service 60 CFS. The connection to West Basin Cal Water is 40. So we have all the water there. And then once we finish the construction of the secondary pipe, the upgrade, that gives the other connections capacity. So that's another, that gets you to 115. So I feel like we have plenty. We have plenty of water. We have plenty of capacity. We will keep the water flowing to those connections to West Basin Cal Water, and looks like they just upgraded and they'll get it up the hill. And so I think water-wise, we're in really good shape, even though you don't see water in that reservoir. So.
Palisades have a reservoir?
That's an interesting, Palisades is an interesting case. I don't know the specifics on their reservoir. Like, what's nice about our reservoir is we have a pipe running through it. We have pipes around it. We have multiple sources. I'm not sure if that one was like more of an end of the line, like you feed it and it sits there like a tank and there's no other ones around it. I'm not certain. But one thing, there was a lot of news and a lot of to-do about the reservoir. LA City has also redundant pipelines, and our pipeline runs close by there, so a lot of that connected capacity I told you about was there for them. If they had that reservoir full, it would have helped, because that would have been like a big tank of water with some extra water there. I did some rough math, and the fire hydrant runs 500 gallons per minute. That thing was perfectly full. it could handle 30 fire hydrants for 15 minutes. So yes, it would have helped, but I don't know if it would have saved the day on that one. So I think the importance in that reservoir is maybe overstated. The trick in a fire, what happens is you've got three things. You need the supply, which I talked about. We have reservoirs full of water, plenty of water. Like the president said, oh, you know, it's because we don't have reservoirs, the houses are burning. No, 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 it's not the case. You have a reservoir, you have a large pipeline, you know, 12-foot diameter pipeline full of water. It goes to the pipe network. The network gets smaller and smaller. If you suddenly turn on tons of hydrants, tons of connections start burning, your landscape leaks out, water leaks out because your house caught on fire and the pipe melted. Now you have a demand problem. You have so much demand and not enough capacity to get there. But behind that capacity, that small pipeline is plenty of water, plenty of reservoir water, plenty of delivery capacity. So it's a pretty complex, you know, pipe network problem. In the case of the PV reservoir, we've got redundancy, we have coverage, you guys are in good shape, even though there's no water in the reservoir. But that pipe access just, it was full. So just some water industry insight for you.
Thank you for all the great information. It's kind of it's going to take a while to get my head around this. I think one thing I'm walking away from was we need to have go bags ready for us and our pets. But I have two specific questions. One is, I think the chief mentioned some kind of measure or gauge of the potential for a fire to happen. You could almost look at it as like a high blood pressure kind of thing. And I just wonder if there's any way that that kind of information could be disseminated generally, like, hey, the blood pressure, the fire potential is getting higher, you need to be aware, and maybe that's done now, but somehow the mayor didn't get the word and left the city. So if there's some way to just, for all of us to get that information, be on alert, I think that'd be helpful. The other thing is, this is very specific. I live in a cul-de-sac. We have surrounded by 5 palm trees. They're really big. When the wind blows or whatever, it's like bombs dropping, the fronds coming down on the cul-de-sac. And I'm just imagining that in a fire situation. So and it may be hard to get a direct answer to this, but should we take our fire? And this is going to take some political activity around the cul-de-sac, but what is your advice in terms of removing those palm trees and perhaps replacing them with something that looks nice but doesn't have the same fire risk? I'll just sit down and wait for your answer.
Okay, so circling back to when we hear red flags, so all of the news outlets will project typically 72 hours out when they think a red flag condition is going to evolve. So it'll first come as a warning. So most of your news media outlets will report out on that, and as it gets closer, it'll go from a warning to alert to full critical fire weather. Now, if you go onto any kind of web-based weather platform, National Weather Service is one of the big ones that we actually use as a fire agency to see what the likelihood of that weather system actually coming to fruition. So if you're concerned and you hear something like, oh, we hear, Santa Ana winds are coming, or dry conditions are coming, or relative humidity is going to be very low, or we're expecting some northeasterly winds, those are all signs that a fire weather condition is developing. So that would be a heads up.
That's encouraging. I get alerts from the city when the dog park's going to close. Mm-hmm. Could the city have a separate alert when the fire potential's high or something to alert us to this?
We do. We send those notifications out. In fact, we sent notifications to our listserv about 48 hours before.
Is that a separate item?
No,
or?
if you subscribe to the listserv to get general information, you should get that. And you should also, Luna had those different apps to download those apps. We push that information out. We tell you, yeah, very good. So you should have received the listserv.
Next time I'll pay more attention.
You should have received the listserv. I know it worked because I got it. Okay. And by the way, remove your palm trees. Yeah, and you can go to the West Basin's website, and they have that Firescape. They actually have a book. If you come to that session, they have a book this thick on what to do in terms of firescaping, what's acceptable, landscaping, what's not acceptable. I'm not a subject matter expert on this, but I have heard a lot about palm trees and how flammable, and eucalyptus trees. So take it out. You'll probably open up some views too. Next question.
Are you familiar with the exterior fire sprinklers? Some of them use pool water, and are they worth investing in?
This is a very common question. So one of the things that one of our water representatives alluded to, that is also something that could be potentially drawing now from the grid system. So that's one maybe con to that system. I will say that the systems do work. And I would recommend that if you are looking at one of those systems and you do have a pool at your residence, utilize or try to buy the pool system. So they have systems where the pump goes into the pool and it feeds the sprinkler system in the area that you're trying to protect on your residence.
I'm wondering if the cities are working with Sacramento on the housing issue, because in my opinion, we've been told to overdevelop. We are a high fire area and they don't seem to care in Sacramento. And it's very concerning to me. If you're on like PV Drive North and Crenshaw at rush hour, there's no way emergency equipment can get through. And it's very scary, and yet they keep ramming this new housing down our throats.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a concern that the peninsula cities have shared, and we've expressed that with our state legislators, and it's part of our legislative platform. When you look at housing, we all know housing is a crisis, and talk about unhoused people. I mean, you know how many thousands of homes burn down, and those people don't have homes. So it is a very serious issue, but density is also an issue and a concern. You heard about the evacuation routes, and much of the peninsula, you have one way in, one way out on some streets. So all of that needs to be looked at in a very balanced and thoughtful approach. And I know the 4 peninsula cities are in the process of drafting a letter to send to Sacramento expressing our concerns regarding housing legislation, and that new laws that are being introduced, that they should take into the very high fire severity zones when they're requiring more housing. So we agree with you.
I know that the cities agree because I know you've fought against it, but they don't seem to care. And that's really concerning to me, and I'm hoping that they wake up when they see what's happened, because we're just as vulnerable as the cities that burn down. And I think as citizens, we need to be really contacting our representatives in Sacramento, because I feel like they're trying to kill us. And they're taking our community, the sense of our communities away by changing them so much.
Understood. Yeah, many times there are unintended consequences. You try to address something in a very global, and you think a one-size-fits-all, but it doesn't necessarily apply that way, and you have to look at every situation individually. And so I know local control is very important, especially here on the peninsula, for that, one of the reasons. Next speaker.
Right before you ask your question, we're going to take these last 2 questions just in the interest of time. And then if anyone else wants to ask a question, please come up to me after, and I will write down your question. I'll make sure to include it in. Where can we look at the It'll be on the RPV website, and I'll push it through the listserv as well once it's ready. So that will be available. And then if you want me to email you directly, you can always give me your email, and I'm happy to do so. But just we'll finish these 2, and then feel free to come up to me afterwards. Go ahead.
Okay. My name's Dennis Swing, and I'm president of a homeowners association that abuts the Los Verdes Golf Course. And I spoke to the chief about it. And the golf course has about 300 feet, about 70 trees set up within 5 feet to 10 feet of our houses. And these are Aleppo pine trees. The LA County arborist came out and said these are Aleppo pine, which is the most highly flammable pine trees around. And, you know, I've gone to the golf course, and the golf course, we don't know who is in charge of the fire department here, you know. So that means to me that it had no inspections. And they said, we'll pick up the dead pine needles, but the trees are gonna be there because they catch the golf balls. So me thinking, you know, catch golf balls, what's gonna happen? Santa Ana winds and catching all these embers and falling all on our houses. And then, you know, in Calle de Sueños, and then going down the Rue de Pierre, and as the chief said, and what I've read, if one house catches on fire, all these houses are gonna catch on fire. And I'm not getting any help. I called Janice Hahn's office, and someone said, well, we'll get back to you, you know, and no one got back to me. And I'm confused about, you know, LA Fire, because they have, you know, they said you shouldn't plant pine trees within 75 feet, you know, defensible space in Zone C or whatever. But when you look at the law, it doesn't state that. So is it, you know, what is that? Is that just a suggestion, or is there a specific law that I can use to talk to the county? I mean, it's idiotic to have that pine trees that aren't being irrigated, you know, so close to our houses. And there's no horizontal spacing. That's gonna cause crown fires. So can someone from the city possibly help me? And then, Chief Kane, if you could tell me, like, what specific fire law, you know, is it recommendation on defensible space, or is there the law? Because I've been looking at all the laws on, you know, AI and all that. I can't find a law that states that. You know, it said you should be defensible space, but doesn't say, you know, so many feet away. So is there someone from the city that can help?
Yes, so why don't you send me an email, what you just, and yes, I'll give it to you at the end here. And I will initiate communications with the county on this.
You know, the golf course said 7 homeowners have contacted them since the fires. So, I mean, I think someone should be looking at I love the golf course, and I golf there, and, you know, I don't want to do it any harm, but, I mean, these pine trees are planted in the 80s. I mean, it's idiotic to put these, you know, pine trees, and all it takes is 18-mile-an-hour wind, that I think it's called ROS, rate of spread, you know, from tree to tree to tree, and then they fall on our houses, and, you know, that's Palisades for you.
Yeah.
So,
Understood, yep.
Appreciate, and do you know any specific law that?
No, but like we spoke earlier,
Yeah.
this is on my priority list.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Dion Hatch. I'm a board member of Del Cerro HOA. We're talking about the pools and the sprinkler system. And one of the things we've also been researching is obviously having 350 feet of hose attached to those. And I was wondering if there's any sort of idea of a program, because these are hundreds. If you think about all the pools in our neighborhood, I would say about every other house has a pool, 30,000, some up even higher that of gallons. To set up a system whereby firefighters could come, see signs on the street that said, a pump here is set up, and they could go right up, turn it on, and then help fight the fires in the area. I think I would say 4 of us in the little area that I'm in have gotten together and started talking about each of us has a pool, and some of us don't, and we could actually help fight the fires in those areas. So I didn't know if you had any recommendations for pool pumps, or because there's a lot of them online now, of course.
And I want to comment on that, and then I'll hand it over to Chief Kane. So Malibu actually has a program where they have signage in front of, if you have a home with a pool, so that the fire department knows that you have a pool. Mm-hmm. We're looking at something very similar that we hope to be able to launch that artwork and make those signs available so that the first responders know if you're a home with a pool. So that's
great.
One answer.
That's great.
Yeah, so all of those systems are awesome. And I can tell you that, especially in the initial actions of an incident, we're going to be very, very resource and equipment limited. So anytime we can have a resident that is prepared and has equipment already laid out for us to use, it's going to be a benefit not only for your house, but also your neighbor's house. Now, just keep in mind that that equipment is only as good as it is maintained. So making sure that you're maintaining that equipment as it relates to anything that runs with gas and fuel and oil and so forth, and anything that could be left outside and getting sun damage and weathered and so forth could create issues down the line. But as I stated before, anytime a house has equipment ready for us to use, it's a benefit to everybody around it.
Great, yeah.
Yes.
Especially you got that auto start on the
Yeah, perfect.
pump.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think we're at the end of the program. We went 15 minutes over, but I want to thank you all for coming out on a Thursday evening. We did receive, as Luna said, approximately 100 questions. What we plan on doing is creating this matrix that will have the questions listed and responses. We'll need a couple days to complete that, and we'll post it on the city's website once it becomes available. So all those questions will be answered. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the city's listserv. We'll send out an announcement when that's available. Thank you, and stay safe and be prepared and be situationally aware.